Hello and welcome back to Pandemic Playground with Dave. Today we have another episode of How to Space Engineers. And today we're going to cover how to get started with your base as soon as possible and what would you need in order to do so. Alright, so getting started in a planet or a moon, usually it's fairly easy because you do get that respawn pod. The only difference is on the moon, it's actually a rover. And for a space pod, it's a little different because you do have a large grid ship to start with. And then of course, spacesuit, absolutely nothing but your backpack with a bit of a jetpack. So this how-to is mainly for, I would say, the respawn pod and not for the moon's rover as well. So if you're interested in how to get started in the moon, check out the moon survival adventure that I had to kind of get a good idea of how to start with that specific rover. But for now, we're going to cover the respawn pod. For simplicity's sake, we're going to start with the difficulty easy on Earth with the respawn pod, and I'll show you how to get started as quickly as possible with the base. Alright, so we landed on Earth and we're going to get started with a base, but ideally what I like to do to get started with a base is to locate a very decent spot. And by saying decent spot, usually what I look for is actually going to be ice first, because you're going to need hydrogen for your thrusters basically. Oxygen, nothing to really worry about, but you just need it for your thrusters or your jetpack. So I usually want to find something that I like to call an ice lake. I think it's really called an ice lake. And just like pan around, look for it, see if we can find an ice lake. That way we can easily gather the ice using a drill or your own drill to look for that. Sometimes you can just find it on the ground, but the best thing to do is to look for the ice lake itself that's located anywhere around Earth basically. So you'll see a whole bunch of those eventually. Alright, so I looked around a little bit, didn't see an ice lake, so we're gonna have to equip our ship to fly a little bit, locate the ice lake, land around there, and start our own base. Alright, so when we're talking about getting started, first thing to do is using your respawn pod. You can turn it to a ship so you can look for that right spot. And of course, we talked about that in our last How to Space Engineers, so check out that video. I'll put it on the top right corner and also in the description itself. But yeah, in that episode, we didn't talk about the very fine details of how to get started. And of course, what you want to do first, once you get off your respawn pod, is 1. Take out your hydrogen bottle so you can have more storage for your hydrogen thruster or your jetpack as you're flying on Earth. Because when you're on Earth, in a gravity or heavy gravity planet, it runs out fairly quickly. But if you're on a moon with less gravity, it runs out a little bit less. So you could get away longer with it. But on Earth, I know it says easy, but it can be a little bit difficult sometimes maintaining that jetpack. So that's why we're gonna look for an ice lake. So first things first, grab that. You can grab the oxygen bottle if you like, but Earth has oxygen, so you don't need it. If you're on a different planet, potentially you do need oxygen. Grab that as well. The next thing to do, of course, is grab what's in your seat. So go into your seat, hit the control panel, and you have a rifle, ammo, and also a GPS marker that you can use to find a local station. Alright, so going to the GPS location, it is a base. So here's the contents of this data pad. So going into the data pad, you'll see a GPS location and a bit of information. So there's like a little bit of a story to it. So what you do, create a GPS marker, go to your GPS tab itself, and of course show on HUD. So now you'll see where that station might be located, and it looks like it is about 24 kilometers away, which is kind of far, but still doable, to be honest. So in order to do, if you did want to go there to start, you can, but ideally you just want to find a good spot with some ice just to make things a lot easier. So I'm just going to convert my ship really quick and start flying. Ooh, that was a bit of a travel, but I did make a quick pit stop at the economy base, but right around the mountain was actually a ice lake. So from here on, we can just pretty much get started with building the base. So the first thing you're going to need is to build out your base a bit, but you're going to need a lot of materials. And in order to do that, you need a drill. And using the drill on hand for now, the best idea is to drill downwards, gather some stone, throw it into your survival kit, and produce the stone and materials that you need for iron, nickel, silicone to start building out some of the things that you really need to have in order to proceed. Alright, so in order to drill for the stone, ideally you want to drill downwards and make a big old hole first. Because the top layer of stone, if you can see here, it's only like 37, 49, and 116. So it's not a lot of stone initially. So the deeper you go, the more stone you're going to have. So if you drill down quickly with the right click, if you're using a PC, you can go deep down into the area where you'll see different color stones. And if you drill it here, you'll see that it's like 268. There's a bit of smaller ones, but you'll see like 268 is a big one. I think if we go even deeper, we're going to have a little more 200s, close to 300s of stone in one little spot or one little pile. So you'll see that one's 357. So the deeper you go, the better. It really depends how deep. I don't think we have to go too deep with this coloration of the stone, but it's always good to have it where you can pick up a whole bunch of stone really quickly. And another tip that I do is once you drill down, as you see here, I mean, you can easily just jump down and everything like that, grab the stone. And of course, you don't want to drill deep down and make a big mess for yourself to get up from, just in case you run out of hydrogen for your thrusters or your jetpack. So what I normally do is really just crouch down, start drilling, hold the collect button, F if you're on the PC, and just make a quick little circle. So that way you collect some of the stones that pop up in front of you, and then a lot of it just drops towards the center of this hole that you're making. So I just normally keep doing this until I can gather as much stone as possible, until I can start making a drilling system, really. Alright, so as you see here, not sure why things are floating, but right here is a big pile of stone. My inventory is completely filled, so now I can just fly up, put it into my survival kit, go back down, grab some more stone really quickly, throw it back into the survival kit, and rinse and repeat. So by doing this, you have a large pile of stone here, so you can constantly just pick up the stone and go to your survival kit. That way, it's a quick way of collecting your stone, and you have it all collected towards the middle. So that's a pretty fun and easy way of collecting stone when you're getting started on your first base. So I'm gonna have to continue doing this for a little bit, and then we'll talk about the base build in a bit. Alright, so something to keep in mind, the survival kit can only produce stone or refined stone. So if you got lucky, unlike me, and find some like nickel ores, iron ores, cobalt ore, you still have to wait until you're able to produce it or refine them through a refinery. Or a basic refinery, actually. Alright, so once we have enough stone and produce enough materials, say steel plates, computers, construction components, interior plates, and motors, things like that, you're gonna need a lot of. So more importantly, it's steel plates initially. So what you want to do first is make your first light armor block and place it on the ground somewhere. So I'm thinking we're gonna put it here. This way we can still drill for stone and also some ice eventually. So I'm gonna put the first block right there and just spread it out just a tiny bit to get enough area coverage so you can start plopping things on. Like so. Alright, so we got a little bit of a 4x3. Just make it a 4x4. Well, if I make it a 4x4, you really can't really see it as it's on the ground. But we'll leave it as that, so it's kind of like a 4x4. And if you initially, when you are building your base structure, you might not want to weld this up just yet, because that's going to cost you roughly 20 to 25 steel plates. And that is a lot of material when you're first getting started. Of course, if you don't weld it up, you have an issue where if it does get damaged, or if you grind it down by accident, you can lose things really, really quickly. But I like it's like a risk versus reward, and the risk of having it not welded versus the reward of saving material in the very beginning is perfectly fine for me. But if you want to be safe, of course, weld them up. Alright, so the next items that you are going to need once you have your base structure build, number one, you want to think about power. How are you going to get power? So there's two ways to get power as quickly, and that is with your solar panels, which is great for collecting energy through the sun. But the problem is during the night, you're not going to have any power whatsoever unless you have a battery that's going to store it. But the battery is going to come a little bit later, to be honest. So the other option is going to be a turbine. A turbine is great for energy, especially if you're in a planet that has an environment to produce wind to spin these turbines. And turbines can be a little particular because you need to make sure there's no blockage from the wind within, I believe, 7 blocks on each side, depending on how you put your turbine. And of course, the higher they are, the better it is as well. And I think about 7 to 10 height from your base or from the ground makes like the best efficient turbine. So those are the two quick ways of getting power and to maintain power for your base before you get a battery stuck in here. We're going to start with making the easy route, and that is going to be building out our turbines. So we're going to build it up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, let's just say 8, 9, 10. Let's just say 10 height. And we're going to build out the turbine itself. And we pretty much just need one initially, and that'll be more than enough. Here we go. So we got a turbine there. We just got to weld it up. And it's going to cost us some parts, but hopefully you gathered enough stone initially to produce all these. So let's get all those things together and be right back. Alright, so we're also going to, just for in case measures, we're going to add a solar panel for extra power. Alright, so we have our turbine spinning pretty quickly actually, which is going to generate a lot of power. We have our solar panel that's getting energy from the sun. The sun is towards that way. It's just a little hard to see with this weather and rain that's happening. But we definitely have more than enough power to use, especially for just an assembler in a refinery. So we can put that on our base as soon as possible, given you have enough parts. So I did notice that we're missing a little bit of blocks here, and I think that is because we got hit by lightning. So yeah, welding it up would be ideal in this case, but at this moment, don't have enough just yet to weld it all up. So that's the risk you gotta take. So weather is fairly new to the game, so that's gonna be a different experience in terms of getting started from what I'm really used to as well. So let's quickly get things started here and start plopping on what we need. And I normally put down the refinery first, so we can have access to refine things like iron ore, silicone ore, nickel ore, and other things. So we want to get this done as quickly as possible. And it does cost a lot of steel plates, as you see is 100 steel plates. Costs additional construction components, motors, computer as well. And we have most of that, just not all of it, to be honest. So we'll weld it up quickly. And of course, when you're waiting for stuff, it's always a good idea to pick up the unknown signals. That way, you can get some extra parts that you could possibly need. Especially what's inside the small container that's in there. For extra measures, you can possibly get a new skin or a suit. As you see here. Cal suit. Not very useful, but yeah. Finally done. It took a little bit of time to gather all the materials, but we have our basic refinery. And the reason why I make the basic refinery first is generally because you could fit not that many stone in your survival kit all at once. And if you have, oh jeez. Alright, the refinery is back online and connected to the base, so it draws the power. So again, like I was saying before, I got interrupted by the lightning. Basically, it gives us the ability to store more stone as we gather them from this little hole. because the survival kit can only store as much as it can. And it gives you the ability to refine it sooner and quicker so you can move on to the next thing. So the other option, yes, you can build the assembler first, the basic assembler first, because you can get all your materials and throw it into the basic assembler from the survival kit. But I feel like that might be the quicker process, but in terms of getting materials, I think it's quicker to build a refinery first. So what you want to do also next, if you're building a basic assembler as the second step, make sure everything's connected, but also make sure there's a hole for you to connect the cargo later, or just access it, to access the materials too. So you don't want to like close this up on the back end and then you put an assembler here because the assembler only have one connection hole, and then you're gonna have an issue trying to collect those items from these two machines. So I'm gonna put the assembler back here, and hopefully we have enough parts and quickly weld this up. Alright, so we are finally done with the assembler, and now we have a basic refinery, basic assembler, onto our base, where we can now produce much more than we can from the survival kit. So now we can produce metal grids, small steel tubes, large steel tubes, as those are materials that are necessary for like the bigger projects, like say a drill system, which is likely going to be the next step. Alright, so from here on out, it's pretty much up to you how you want to do this. You can start building a vehicle or a ship to start drilling, or build a drill from the base so you can get as much material as possible. And, you know, it's all up to you. The way I normally do it is start to build a drilling system right over here to start gathering as much materials as I can. Alright, so as I'm making my drill, and since we now have that hinge block, we're going to use a hinge instead of a rotor, because we used to use a rotor for this drill. And what I mean is using the rotor or the hinge to create a smaller head so it can fit the smaller drill onto the system. That way you can save on a lot of materials. So in order to do that, build your hinge and then your large grid hinge, remove the head, and of course attach the smaller head. Go to your control panel, go to hinge or rotor, whichever you want to do, and attach a smaller head. So you have the small head here. So now we have the small head, we're going to weld it up, and now we will need to put on a conveyor junction, because you cannot put a small little drill and attach it to that big connector there. So what you need is going to be a conveyor junction, and it's going to be this one here. It's the one with the big connection and the 3 smaller connections on the side. So the smaller 3 connections is always opposite of each other. So you want to be placing them very specifically, and that is going to be, it'll be something like this. Alright, so with a conveyor junction like this, you have the 3 small container holes, small connection holes on the left and right side of it, and all the larger ones are connected. This way it makes it a little bit easier, so you can build out a connection to a drill, and we can start connecting them here. So this drill, the smaller one, saves on the large steel tubes, because you want the big one. It costs 12 and a lot of steel plates, 180 of them. The smaller one is 4 steel tubes and 20 steel plates, which is a lot less than the bigger one. So how to connect it all? You can kind of put this in the middle and just rotate it this way. So then once you have that directly in the middle, using a small conveyor tubes, you can easily connect it with 2 of them here. Alright, so we're all welded up, and now what we want to do is get the drilling system to start going down. With the hinge, we can make it kind of swing left and right if we really wanted to, but I'm probably not going to get into it too much as of now. What we want to do now is just to start digging straight down. We're going to go to our control panel, go to our drill, turn it on, go to our piston, and what we want to do is potentially change the velocity to positive to start making it go down. and 0.5 is decent if you just want to go straight down. So we're just gonna hit reverse, and it'll start drilling down and collecting our materials. So the first layer is going to be a lot of ice, and then it's gonna gather stone, hopefully, once it gets down there quick enough. So it's going way too fast, and it can damage your drill system, basically. So you kind of do want to slow it down. I slowed it down to 0.2 instead of 0.5, and it's still not doing as great, but it's not terrible. And it's gathering mostly ice, so we don't have enough depth with the pistons right now to gather stone. But of course, you can position this in an opposite way, so it can be right here. So that way you get stone instead of ice. So instead of gathering it that way. But having it on the hinge makes it more interesting, because now we can bring it back up. Alright, so we brought it back up for the most part, and now what we can do with the hinge is kind of put a little bit of an angle to it. So we can probably increase it just so slightly, like that, and then just have the piston go back down. So it's getting down at 0.2, and now with one drill we can drill additional area to get more stone or ice, but in this case ice, because of the positioning of the drill itself. So now of course you can rinse and repeat, bring it up, angle it with the hinge a little bit, and pretty much gather as much stone and ice as possible in the very beginning. And if you had the ability to do so, get a timing block, so then you can start making the hinge swing left and right ever so slowly, and bring the piston down very, very slowly to start sweeping and gathering the materials that way. Alright, so here's an example of this with the timer blocks. So you can add the timer blocks, set the hinge up so it goes backwards, swinging left and right, as you see here. So I did that with two timer blocks, really. And the setup is fairly simple. The trigger is just to start reverse every few seconds, depending how fast you set it up. So if you want to learn my setup, I have it under the hinge velocity is at 4 RPMs. My two timing blocks is at 8-second delay for both of them, as you see here. Setup actions, you have hinge on reverse, and it's telling to hit the other timer block. So the second timer block tells the first timer block to start, and the first timer block tells the second timer block to start after 8 seconds or so. Well, once it hit, it tells it to start, and it delays 8 seconds to start. So now it's just rotating left and right, left and right. So now the next part is to make the piston go down, but you have to make sure it goes down fairly slowly so that it can sweep across without having to damage anything or get stuck. So I think one of my go-tos in terms of going down in velocity, I would say would be pretty much 0.01 or 0.02, which is really, really slow. But sometimes I bring it up to like 0.5 or so. So maybe I'll say 0.05 and see what happens for now. And if it goes down too fast, then we definitely need to change it up. So it looks like it's decent, but I feel like it's still going a little too fast, though that it is going to cause a little bit of an issue. So we probably, actually, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to set it as 0.01. Yep, so 0.01 seems to be a lot better. It's really, really slow, but it is going to be able to ensure that it's not going to destroy any part of the drill whatsoever. Alright, so it's going to take its time. So what you can do on the side is start building out your base, build out your, and get some more materials if you need it. And look for like iron ore, nickel ore, cobalt ore, and things like that. So this is pretty much a setup. Leave it as is for now, and come back to it and upgrade it as needed. So eventually you will need to make this piston a little higher and add another one so you can go down a little bit more too. Alright, so this is the first time I'm making this kind of drill with a hinge. So let's see how it looks in a time lapse. Alright, so this is going to be the finished product of pretty much getting started. So this way, you have your respawn pod for materials, or you could turn it into a proper first vehicle. Now you have a basic refinery, a basic assembler, and a working drill system to help you gather material. So the next step from here is definitely to find some ore, whether it's iron, nickels, silicone, cobalt, gold, silver, platinum, uranium, and things like that. So then you can progress with your space engineer building. So this is one of the quickest ways I've learned to get your power, get your materials refined, create those materials, and of course get those materials. But like I said, this is the very basic setup to get started, which has been my go-to for a very long time when I start a new adventure, especially when it's on a planet or a moon. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, especially for those who are just starting with space engineers and didn't know how to get the basics up and running. But of course, if you guys did enjoy this video, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and of course, leave us some comments. And as always, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you. Bye.